Welcome to Drew Coat Sports Talk. I am your host, Cody Johnson, where we talk about life, sports, and everything in between. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode of Drew Coat Sports Talk. We've got a lot to talk about in the world of the NFL, as well as some other topics going on around the sports world. But before we get started, please do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching right now on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you can give us a like, share this, turn on notifications, all that good stuff, so that way you guys are informed when we have an updated episode coming out, whether it's a live stream or we're just posting content. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, listen to us on a podcast. Obviously, that's what this show is. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts at whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeart. We're on all the platforms. So if you prefer to listen rather than watch, it's still also great for us, and we'd appreciate it if you guys go over there, show some support, and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We'd love to know what we can do to get better, and then also how you like the show. So I would surely appreciate it. That is for sure. Anyways, you guys, no Drew this week as usual. You know, he's knee deep right now in Sanger West sports. They just had their senior night last Friday. It sounds like that they were defeated, unfortunately, at the hands of their opponent. And so I think that they have one more game left, and then that's the end of the football season. And he is gearing up for basketball season right now. Boys varsity is going to start like within a couple of weeks or next week, I think. And we were talking about that this past weekend. We took a family trip together. Our families and I, we were able to hang out. So we got to have some bay time and fill me in on what's going on. And he sends his love and his well wishes. And, hopefully we'll get him on when there's a break somewhere on a show. But for now, you guys get me. And anyways, he sends his best, and he will be pumping out some more Stingers Up content really, really soon. I know that he has been delayed in it just because, like I said, basketball's coming up and all that other stuff. So thank you guys again for letting me talk through all the housekeeping notes. And, I won't even tell you guys to go check us out on social media, even though you should. And if you guys need any of those links, they're in the episode card of the show you're watching or wherever you're listening. So, okay, I think I've touched base on all that right now. So, right now I'm currently watching the Lakers game right now. It's almost halftime. I just witnessed Bronny James and LeBron James go, and they first father-son duo in NBA history to share the floor, not only in the preseason, but in the regular season. I don't know if he has scored yet. When I was starting the recording, there was a design play to get Bronny an open look, and I don't think he hit it. And I don't know if there was any other shot attempts since I've been recording at the moment. So, but history was made. History has been witnessed, and it's really, really cool to see. LeBron James has just been around the NBA so long that his oldest son, Bronny, is also on the same team as him, and they're able to share the court. And the only notable professional sports that we've seen that happen was baseball with Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr., which, happened, I think, 30-something years ago. So it's pretty cool to see that nowadays, especially, in the year 2024, we're witnessing that, and just goes to show the longevity of LeBron James in his career. 22nd season, obviously Bronny's first season, second-round pick, and all that good stuff. And, I didn't really get a chance to talk about this when it happened. And before I dive into the NFL, I'll just briefly talk about this. First off, Bronny James getting into the NBA, I think is really cool. Sure, you can argue nepotism with LeBron James and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is, he did get into the NBA. I don't think that he will be like in the regular rotation of the Lakers at all, majority of the regular season. I can see Bronny James being called up for like filling in for injuries. For, let's say he's performing well in the G League, they may call him up. But I think tonight's opening night was strictly just for history to appease LeBron James and letting him be able to play next to his son and share the floor. I'm sure they'll do that a couple more times or maybe several more times this season. But for the most part, I do think that Bronny James is more or less of a project, and he will probably be sent down to the G League affiliate where he'll work on his game, get used to the speed of the game, and all that stuff. Because you got to remember, I mean, I think it was last year when he played minimal games with USC. He is just coming back from a cardiac arrest, which if anyone watched the Netflix series where it talked about LeBron James and his family, that was a scary time for them. And Bronny James having to work his way back to even be in the position he's at to be drafted, and multiple teams be comfortable enough to take a second round flyer on him. Because you got to remember, he is just a second round pick. I mean, if he makes a roster and is productive, that's a win. And there are several second round picks that have had really great careers. Nikola Jokic is one of them. I think Draymond Green is another player that was a second round pick that has had a great career. I think a lot of the pressure on Bronny James is just because of who his dad is, which rightfully so. I mean, that's huge pressure. But if there's ever a role model to teach him the speed of the game or how it works, or just, the fact that he grew up around the game. And, I'd imagine Bronny James has that maturity to kind of understand like what it takes to be great in the NBA after witnessing his dad do it. And will he live up to the LeBron James mantle? I don't know. I think it's just really cool that we're witnessing this. And, there's multiple generations of athletes that are now coming through that we were watching, or at least Drew and I were watching their fathers play, and now we get to see their kids come up. And it's been very, very interesting, very, very cool to see, and just reminds us of how much older we're getting and how fast time is flying. But, the fact that Bronny James is getting an opportunity here, I think is pretty cool. And, we'll see how the rest of the regular season goes and how far the Lakers go and how much playing time Bronny goes. But yeah, I think that's my only report on the Lakers right now. I won't really talk about the game more so. It's game 1 of 82, so there's really not a whole lot you can report on regarding the NBA. Boston and the Knicks played earlier today. Boston just shellacked the Knicks. So for all you Knicks fans that were excited about getting Cat, sour first game. I imagine the Knicks will be good, but not against the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics took care of business on ring night nonetheless. So anyways, okay, so that's enough for the NBA. I'm going to dive in right now to going to talk about the Raiders. I mean, nothing new to report here. Raiders lost to the Los Angeles Rams in LA at SoFi Stadium. This one was a little bit closer. So when Drew and I were with our families over the weekend, I didn't get a chance to see any of the game. I watched some highlights. It was pretty much more the same what we've been seeing majority of the season. Run game looked a little bit better, but LA Rams defense is pretty banged up. So obviously there's some opportunity there. Aiden O'Connell goes out with a thumb injury. It looks like now he's on the IR for the next 4 to 6 weeks. For part of the game, I mean, I was seeing that Gardner Minshew was in. He threw 3 interceptions. And, obviously playing from behind majority of the game, you're going to turn one-dimensional. I talked about this last week, that when we're playing defenses, when we fall behind, we don't have a run game, we end up turning into a one-dimensional team, and that's exactly what happened to us, in our previous week's loss. And, it's what happens when we have to throw the ball a lot. More opportunities of interceptions happen, which is what happened with Gardner Minshew. Not only did we get the Gardner Minshew turnovers and the 3 interceptions that I mentioned earlier, but of course, the Raiders recently have been plagued with turnovers, which are costing us games, as well as very undisciplined football where we're penalizing ourselves out of these games. We had 10 penalties for 80 yards and we had 4 turnovers. That's like the kiss of death for us when it comes to being able to be in these games or not. We lost by 5, and we were doing our best. From what I'm seeing here from the highlights and whatnot, is we were doing our best to kind of drive within territory. It was just our own costly mistakes that basically prohibited us from winning. Basically, we were the ones that caused our own defeat, even though the Rams, again, all banged up, as bad as they are, obviously with a very well coached team in Sean McVay, the Raiders just couldn't overcome that. And one of the things I do want to compliment, though, about the Raiders is the defense looked a little better. The tackling seems to be an issue. We seem to still be not committed to tackling like early on when it comes to the ball carrier. But I did see a little bit more aggression in the defense, which was good. I mean, Max Crosby came away with a sack. He seemed to be a little bit more in the game than previously. Hopefully, his ankle injury is healing up a little bit, so he's going more full speed. And, our secondary needs a lot of work. Matthew Stafford still was able to find his targets, but it's Matthew Stafford. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, of course, with a defense that is banged up, inexperienced, or just not playing in sync, he's got to take advantage of that, of the mismatches. He's got to take advantage of that inexperience, and he did so. Now, it wasn't super crazy. I'm not going to say here that he threw for 500 yards and made us look bad. He threw for $154. He turned the ball over one time, and it was particularly the run game for the Rams. Kerryon Williams, he did his thing. Raiders run defense is non-existent. A lot of that could be because we don't have Christian Wilkins in the middle any longer. Obviously, we've gone through a lot of injuries on the defensive side, so that's a big hit to us. But same old for the Raiders. Turnovers, penalties, not being able to finish games. It's what's getting us into these positions. Now we've dropped to 2-5. We've lost our last, I believe it's 3 games in a row. And, I put out a video last week that I feel like that AP needs to take away play calling from Luke Getsy, because from the highlights even that I saw, same typical play call, questionable play calling in pivotal times. And I think we can all agree Luke Getsy obviously isn't the guy. I don't need to beat a dead horse here. In the TikTok video, though, there were a lot of comments that made really good points. And, Luke Getsy was not AP's first choice. If I'm not mistaken, it was either Ben Johnson or Kubiak. And there was one other OC that they had mentioned. Oh, I think it was Kingsbury. But something with the contract, the amount of money, the length of time, I guess, Telesco and Davis wouldn't sign off on, which is ultimately why Kingsbury rescinded his acceptance of the job and is now with the Commanders, doing really well with Jaden Daniels. But clearly, Getsy was not AP's first choice. He's making it work. I think we're seeing that it's not working, and we're now along for the ride. And I think it's, if AP is not the guy to make that decision, then this is Tom Telesco and a Mark Davis to make the decision to get this play call changed, because the offense looks the same. Some of the things that the Raiders did today, and I believe yesterday, was they added a couple of players to the practice squad. Hopefully they're going to activate them. Desmond Ridder, formerly with the Atlanta Falcons, was signed off of the Arizona Cardinals practice squad, so he'll probably be elevated to the starting or until the active roster probably this week. And that's adding quarterback depth since we don't have AOC for the next few weeks. We did also sign Terrance Marshall, which is an interesting one. I think he was a 3rd round draft pick with Carolina, was supposed to have a high ceiling. For some reason in Carolina didn't achieve it. So now that he's on our team, maybe we can get a lot of production out of him, considering, again, he had a lot of talent and a lot of great remarks regarding his potential play, or, the type of player that he could be in the NFL. And, I'm curious to see if that can translate. So those are some pretty decent signings. I don't know if it's going to change the needle much for the Raiders, because, again, I think we're at a point now where we understand that we're not very competitive right now. We don't have a quarterback. Offensive line is banged up. It probably needs to be addressed in the draft. Defense is extremely banged up. It's also going to have to be addressed either in free agency or the draft. And that's where we're at right now. I'm seeing a lot of comments, though, about AP needs to be fired. And I understand that this is the 4th year in a row since, we were in the wild card that we underperformed and the head coach isn't making the right decisions and all that. I completely get it. I understand. I don't think it's a smart move for us, though, to fire our head coach, or AP at least, 7 weeks into his first full year of being the full-time head coach. I know that he had 9 weeks or 8 weeks, I think, of interim head coaching, last season, but that was with a staff that he did not bring in. That was with players that he necessarily didn't have that much of a say in keeping on the roster outside of, him being the linebacker coach at the time. And obviously with him being the interim, the defense played a lot better. Offense still wasn't really great. And now in this season, same thing. Offense isn't great. Defense, I think, has taken a step back because we've got some players, again, that are injured. Also, too, we have a lot of players that are needing to be held accountable, and we're seeing that kind of being played out right now. I don't think that the Raiders have given up. I just think that they're going through what a team goes through when you lose, and that's a lot of turmoil. The pressure is hot, and until they win, it won't go away. It's going to feel like the world is coming to an end until they, win and get that monkey off their back. And calling for AP's job, though, just to me is a little bit immature. Or not immature, excuse me, is a little bit premature is what I mean to do right now and this soon. We haven't had enough time to really determine if it's AP, the players, maybe it's Telesco and how he evaluates draft picks and all that stuff. So to say that AP needs to go, that's really tough because very rarely you're going to find a head coach that's going to come in, in year one and change everything to where we're contenders. Jim Harbaugh right now in LA right now with the Chargers, he just had a loss against the Cardinals, and that offense outside the offensive line and the run game don't look very good. Justin Herbert was able to throw it a lot, but they don't really have any weapons right now. And even though it's his first season back and he coached the 49ers and took them to the Super Bowl and all this stuff, it's still like working out the kinks, and they don't clearly have the team that they are saying is Super Bowl contenders quite yet. And the Raiders are in that boat right now too. They don't have the roster that is going to be able to compete with Kansas City, with Detroit, with Buffalo, with name the contender. We don't have the team for that yet. We had a very good win against the Ravens because our defense played hard when it was healthy. Davante Adams was on the offense, so we had an offensive weapon, and we had pretty good play call. We also had momentum on our side. I also think a lot of it was the Ravens, did kind of shoot themselves in the foot in certain play calls and decision making, which worked in our favor. But that doesn't mean that our roster can go up with the best of the best quite yet. And to not let AP have at least a couple of seasons, 3 seasons even, or at least the full extent to the 5-year deal that he just got signed for is really hard to say, like, yeah, after 7 weeks, we got to get going. It's got to look rough. It's his first head coaching gig full-time. Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions had some really rough first years. Was really, really tough to watch. And it looked like the same old Lions. We would make fun of Dan Campbell mentioning about biting kneecaps. And then you would see clips of Dan Campbell in training camp or practice clips where he is very emotional, very vulnerable, and very adamant about how much he cares and loves his players and how he's, trust in him and he's going to get them to success. And he promises them that. And look at where they're at now. They are the top contending team in the NFC, and they just went toe-to-toe with the undefeated Minnesota Vikings with a defense that has been shutting out quarterbacks majority of the season. Jared Goff, the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, they played great. They were able to have their way on the line of scrimmage. They were able to, when they didn't have a lead, they were able to remain calm, make plays, and ultimately came away with a late field goal to seal it and then just rely on their defense to not give up the lead, which they didn't. And they, defeated the Minnesota Vikings in division. And again, that's a testament to how well coached, how well disciplined, how much they play hard for their coach. And I think AP will get there, but we'll never know if we let him go after 7 weeks. And I get it. Like, we have had decades of bad coaching, blame it on maybe the ownership with Mark Davis, whatever the case may be, whatever the gripe is, or your issue that you've had with Raiders about how they've been running the organization. I get it. I've been a fan for 20 something years as well, since I was really young. And I get it. Like, I've seen them when they had a really fun team, when we had the likes of Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, Rich Ganning. Like, we had a fun team for a while. And then I remember the Super Bowl where we lost to the Buccaneers, and the years following that, how bad we were. The bad draft picks, the bad signings, Jamarcus Russell. I remember that. I remember passing on Michael Crabtree for Darius Haywood-Bay, even though we could have had both players if we would have just drafted correctly, because of Al Davis when he was alive at the time. I remember signing Matt Flynn to a huge contract, and he wasn't even the starting quarterback. It ended up being Derek Carr, who we drafted. I remember all of that. And don't get me wrong, I'm ready for it to be over too. And I think we saw glimmers of hope for the Raiders and success and expectations when we had Derek Carr. And, we got close when 2016, obviously we were led to the playoffs, which was great up until Carr broke his foot, or his leg, excuse me. And then we've been climbing since. And then even the years that we had John Gruden, we started off slow, and then we started looking like a team, like a disciplined team, an aggressive team. And unfortunately, that came to a halt with the Henry Ruggs situation, with John Gruden's offensive emails and whatever else that basically, unfortunately, got him removed as head coach of the Raiders then, to where we had Rich Bisaccia kind of lead us the rest of the way. So we've been fighting to get relevant since that time. And I get it. Like, we want to get there. We want to be a mature team. We want to be a team that's respected and not laughed at. I get it, but we're not going to get there if we keep firing a head coach after a handful of games. I agree with the Josh McDaniels firing for sure. I'm not trying to say that we should have let that run out for 3 or 5 more years. Like, Mark Davis made the right decision on that. I don't think we're in the same boat with Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce. I think they're 2 different coaches. We're just struggling with the same roster, and it's going to take time to get out of it. And especially with AP and Tom Telesco, let's let some adults in the room, let them kind of figure this out, because Tom Telesco has a really good record of drafting good quality players when he was with the Chargers. And the way it all ended with Brandon Staley and his tenure, that's one thing. But now we have Tom Telesco, we have AP. We got to put a little bit of trust in these guys and let them kind of let them get us into the future. We can't just jump off the ship just because we are hitting some rough waves. It's got to get rougher before it gets better, and we need to just ride this out. And I get it. Like, the offense looks bad, defense looks bad. There will probably be a lot of coaching changes next season as well. I don't think AP is one of those coaches that need to be changed. I think, too, let him learn from this experience. He'll never be a great head coach if he doesn't go through some bad coaching years. This is probably just one of those years, probably one of those times where he's got to figure it out. So that's what I would say with that. I mean, Raider Nation, it's going to be rough. It sucks. It sucks having hope for your team on a Sunday or Monday or Thursday, whenever they play. And even though, we're at this year, like, not a great team, and you get fired up for game day and you have a little bit of hope, and then they give you a little bit of that hope when you're within scoring and striking distance of, like, let's say the Rams, for example, which, could make us feel a lot better. And then we don't execute because we're just not there yet. And then we're let down again. Like, I get it. We're right there, and it's going to be rough. It still will probably get a lot rougher, but just hang in there. We've come this far. We didn't come this far to come this far. So let's just hunker down and, let's just look for the future. We know that this isn't the team that's going to get us a Super Bowl. I mean, I think the expectations of that were pretty explanatory. But for the future now, it's just like, okay, what can we do to get this team on the right track? Who are some future prospects? Let's look ahead. So I think that's what I would say for that. So moving off of the Raiders, let's go into a couple of games I did want to highlight just because I feel like they need to be talked about a little bit. Of course, I got to talk about the Jets losing their first game with Davante Adams on Sunday Night Football to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers made a quarterback change where they announced that Russell Wilson was going to be the starting quarterback, and they benched Justin Fields. Justin Fields led the Steelers to a 4-2 record at the time. I was not in the camp that Justin Fields should have been benched. I thought he should continue to ride it out up until like it should have been done. Credit to Mike Tomlin though for saying no, we're going to make a change right now, and we're going to go with Russell Wilson as the starting quarterback, and he did really great. Probably the best, or probably the second best quarterback game that the Steelers have had outside of Justin Fields. I think he threw for over 300 yards, but I think that game was in a loss, ironically enough. So this game against the New York Jets, where Russell Wilson looked really good, over 250 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns, one of them being a rush, 2 of them being throwing touchdowns, and really just taking it to the Jets. And the Jets, again, failing to score 20 points, even though Aaron Rodgers has Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, supposedly a top 5 defense. They have all these pieces to make a run for the Super Bowl, and they made this trade to get Davante, fired their head coach. They're ready to go. Still lost. And I think what's funny enough is the Raiders and the Jets are both 2-5. I think too, statistically, if we were to match them up next to each other, they're probably an identical team. I'd have to check all these numbers, but I'd imagine they're the same team. So that's why I think what I'm frustrated with the Davante Adams trade is I understand him as a player wanting to leave and go to somewhere competitive. But you go to the Jets, and the argument is I don't think they're more competitive than the Raiders. They just have a quarterback that you like that can throw you the ball, which is fine. But that doesn't mean that gets you any closer to winning or being competitive. And it kind of negates your argument that, like, yeah, I'm in this stage of my career, I'm looking to win. Okay, I'm sure Baltimore probably could have used your services, even though they don't look like they really need any more help. Buffalo just made a trade right now for a wide receiver in Amari Cooper. I'm imagining that they were probably in the market for it. I'm sure that there is a dozen other teams. The Steelers, ironically enough, probably would have made some sort of deal or done something to get Davante Adams. And the fact that the Jets, with no head coach, said, yeah, let's add Davante Adams, let's do whatever we can to get him. And they not only took his entire contract, gave a 3rd-round pick conditional too, which, let's be honest, guys, we're probably just only going to have a 3rd-round pick. And it is what it is. Like, in order for us to get the 2nd-round pick, Davante Adams needs to be voted as an all-pro 1 or 2, and also the Jets need to be in the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl of that factor. So just baseline, we have a 3rd-round pick, and the Jets look no better. Like, they still have the same offense. Aaron Rodgers still is kind of, making poor decisions. I mean, he threw the ball slightly better, but Davante Adams only had, I think it was, like 3 receptions, I think. The offense still looks like they don't have an identity. The interim head coach really doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, and that's a Super Bowl contender, supposedly. I don't know about that. That's where I think I get upset about the whole situation of the argument of being in a more competitive team just kind of goes out the window. You just traded one window view for another one, and I would argue that new window view that you got is a worse situation. So now you both can be miserable together. So we'll see. Anyways, but nonetheless, though, of course, the Jets lose to the Steelers on Sunday Night Football in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh absolutely controlled that game from start to finish. Their defense got after it. They look great. So I'm not going to lie, it was nice to see the Jets lose in the fashion that they did, where they don't look any better, and all this hype around, oh, now we're all in. Get out of here. They're now 2-5. They would have to haul off and win the next 9 of 10 games or something of that factor, just so that way they can be 10-6 and maybe be in wild card contention. And that's if other teams don't have a better record, which is possible, but that is something that, you know, they would have to do. And I don't know about you guys, this team does not look like a team that can go 9 out of 10. If they do, it's more like 9 losses out of 10 games, but not the other way around. So that's what I'll say about the Jets. So we'll see how it all goes. I mean, still it is what it is, but it is kind of nice to see that first game. The Jets didn't win, so it was nice. And I think the game of the week that I want to touch base on is the Lions and the Vikings. And again, I talked about this a little bit on the intro, but you know, this was probably equivalent to like an NFC championship game, and it might be a preview of one in the postseason, but Lions and the Vikings put on a show, and I thought it was really good. It really tested the Vikings defense to see if they were able to control or at least tame the Lions, which the Lions are probably the hottest team right now in the NFL outside of the Kansas City Chiefs. And to see how well the Lions played against like the number 1 defense, or at least number 2. I think the Chiefs are number 1. But to see them play as well as they did against a really tough defense was so good. And I would argue like they didn't even utilize all their weapons. Now, I think that they have an interesting challenge coming up because for the next 2 games, Jameis Williams is going to be out because of, I think, the PED drug policy. I think he was caught with PED in the system, at least according to reports. So he's out the next 2 games. So now it's to see like what is the next receiver that is going to fill the role. Maybe Tim Patrick. Amon St. Brown is still the number 1 guy there. Sam Laporta might get a little bit more involved now in the offense. And of course, you got the 2-headed monsters, Sonic and Knuckles, Jamar Gibbs, and David Montgomery. Phenomenal. And that offensive line of the Detroit Lions is it's the second best offensive line I've ever seen outside of when the Dallas Cowboys, I believe it was when they were running DeMarco Murray like 400 and something times. They had at that time statistically the best offensive line in the NFL. And I think it was because they were rushing the ball like over 200 yards on average, I think for a majority of that season. And that was like one of the best offensive lines I've ever seen. And the Lions, I think, have the second best one I've ever seen. They're just so good at run blocking, pass blocking, just great from end to end. And then on the defensive side of the ball, even though they gave up, I believe it was 29 points in this one, they played really well. You know, bend and don't break. Obviously, they're going up against a really good offense in the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, who's been coaching up Sam Darnold, and obviously they got weapons like Justin Jefferson, Jalen Nailors, and who's the other kid, Jordan Addison. You know, they've got a trio that is a very, very good trio. And, you know, of course, you can only do your best to contain a high-octane offense like what the Vikings have. And they did a really, really good job when it mattered the most. They were able to get off the field. And it was just very, very impressive to see. And I was really surprised to see it. And I have to say, if there's a team that I'm kind of rooting for in the NFC, it's kind of the Detroit Lions. Like the Detroit Lions is that team that obviously grown up as an NFL fan saw that they were the worst team every single year in the NFL. Every year they were a train wreck. I mean, I remember the years they had Matthew Stafford, they had Megatron. That was kind of fun, but they always lost. I remember when they went 0-16. That was an interesting year. So I remember all those seasons with Detroit being bad. And now to see them actually flourish and be really, really good. Last year getting to the NFC Championship game and losing to the 49ers. It's really cool to see the Detroit Lions be competitive. And after all these years of bad coaches, bad players, bad seasons, to see it all kind of actually they're now a legit contender to be in the Super Bowl, and they have a very good shot at winning it. Like if you were to put the Lions and the Chiefs on the field today, who would win? And I think there's a lot of people that would probably say the Lions just because of their offensive line, their run game, their defense, and I'm sure a lot of people would pick Patrick Mahomes as well because it's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in today's game, even though he is not playing that great. I mean, let's be honest. Patrick Mahomes is kind of taking a step back from him being this guy that will throw it all over the field. A lot of that is because he's got injuries to his receivers, this and that. And, again, the Chiefs are still undefeated. But if you would have put them on the field and you had Chiefs and the Lions going against each other, I think there's a lot of people that would say the Lions probably would edge out the Chiefs in that. And it's because of how good they are, how well coached they are. Also, too, Ben Johnson, that offensive coordinator, he is very, very creative. And he was able to get Jared Goff in a situation where he was able to beat the Minnesota Vikings defense, which Brian Flores has gotten the best out of this defense to go up against, like Aaron Rodgers, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy. And I know these aren't names that are like, that aren't Patrick Mahomes-esque, but I mean, they've all played pretty well this season against good teams. And so for a defense to really just befuddle a lot of these quarterbacks and for Detroit to go into this game and be able to go head to head with that defense and walk out with a victory. I know that the Chiefs have a good defense, but a good neutralizer would be that the Detroit Lions. So that's what I'll say about that, man. Like, the Lions are for real. And I've put this in my notes about a dozen times about how good they are and how like dangerous I believe that they are. So, let's see. So a couple of other questions I put in here. Niners losing to the Chiefs. Obviously, they lost 28-18. Brock Purdy had a pretty bad offensive game. I think he threw 3 interceptions. The Niners lost Brandon Ayuk for the season to a torn ACL. Fun fact, Drew and I, who are in 2 different podcast leagues, the one league that I'm going to talk about it's the I think it's the Nothing But Raiders podcast fantasy football league, and we made a trade with a guy named Rodney. Really great guy, actually. You guys go check out his YouTube channel. Made a trade with him. This was what we agreed to on Saturday night. We were going to give Jameis Williams to Rodney, and he was trading us Brandon Ayuk and Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey. And I can understand the trade on his perspective. Brandon Ayuk has underperformed. Christian McCaffrey, there's really no confirmed word on when he's going to be back or how soon or anything of that nature. And then Jameis Williams at the time, this is again Saturday night, very productive Detroit receiver. Someone that's going to take the top off the defense, and you were seeing a lot of production coming out of a lot of production with Williams in Detroit's offense. And, it's, to me, I like when Drew and I got that trade request, it made sense for both sides. Like, okay, we can sign off on this, and not just the whole, like, the Christian McCaffrey thing. It was more like, hey, look, Brandon Ayuk had a pretty good game. Jameis Williams is, had a good game. I think we'll pretty much get a wash on that. And we're really taking a chance on if CMC is even close to CMC, because there's still a possibility that he may not be back to fantasy relevant CMC. He might be, he might still be focused on, but we're risking if he gets injured, especially the type of injury it was, where it's like Achilles tendonitis and a calf situation. How likely is that he gets re-injured or has a season-ending injury, or if he's going to be back in general? Because let's be honest, the Niners now being 3-4, and let's say that they keep getting deeper and deeper and become 3-5, 3-6 by the time he comes back, because I think he's supposed to be back by week 10, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just say we get to that point and the Niners are 3 games below 500. They're probably out of playoff contention. What's the point of bringing Christian McCaffrey back? when you can give him like an additional time to heal and be ready for next season, if I'm thinking of it as a franchise. So for Drew and I, we're like, well, we'll take the upside on the Christian McCaffrey thing. Kid you not, guys, on Sunday, we get notifications that Brandon Ayuk is out, potential torn ACL confirmed on Monday. And then also too that Jameis Williams is suspended for the next 2 games because of PED violations. And we did get a positive note that Christian McCaffrey may be available by week 10. That was on Monday, but it's still like a long shot. So we're not sure. So needless to say, I don't know who the trade benefited the most of, but it was really interesting that all that took place on a Sunday. And so we're now without Brandon Ayuk, who we traded for, and Rodney, who now has Jameis Williams. He'll be without him for the next 2 weeks. We may get back Christian McCaffrey. Still don't know quite yet. So it was just very interesting. But what I'll say here is, again, the Niners lost to the Chiefs. The Niners are 3-4. Again, multiple injuries all over the field from the defensive side of the ball and offense. I mentioned this in my bold picks. It didn't really take off as well as I anticipated. But I did mention that the Niners were probably going to go through an injury phase. Their window to the Super Bowl, getting back there is closing. Like what Drew would mention with Super Bowl hangover, he thinks it's a real thing. It's so hard to get back there and then to even win. And, the chances of the losing team getting back there, there's just too much that kind of is against you to begin with. And Niners come in with all this hype about being the number 1 team in the NFC. And yeah, they did look great week 1. And then they lose kind of games they should have won against divisional opponents like the Rams and the Cardinals. They did defeat Seattle Seahawks in convincing fashion. And then, they dropped games to the Chiefs, which I was actually a little shocked by. But again, injuries, and the Chiefs defense is a lot better than I think we gave them credit for. And so that changes a lot as well. But now with the 49ers being 3-4, all these injuries, Deebo Samuel didn't play because he was suffering with pneumonia apparently. And you just wonder, like, when's enough? And it's really hard to see the Niners putting it all together at the end, because it just seems like anytime that they're on a roll, and this, and I'll use the Chiefs as the Chiefs game as an example. They were coming off of a victory with the Seahawks where they were now at 500, and it was a convincing win. A lot of great offensive production. Defense looked pretty good. So now, okay, let's put it all together, or at least get on a run. And they couldn't. And again, the Chiefs are defending Super Bowl champions. I'm not trying to say the Chiefs weren't a worthy opponent or they're this bad team that just had one over the Niners. No, they beat up on the Niners, but it's just the fact that the Niners are in a position where, like, if you lose a game to the Chiefs and let's say you took care of business everywhere else, okay, maybe we're 5-2 and we're okay. We lead the division. We know what we need to work on if we see the Chiefs again. No, you are now 3-4. You lose a game to the Chiefs, and you're losing players to injury even more. And not only that, but in your own division, I think you're second or third, or tied for third. So, or tied for second, excuse me. So, they may not even win their division, which means that they would have to leapfrog somebody to get into the wild card. And if the season were to end today, everyone in the NFC North gets a spot, and the Seahawks would be the only team out of the West in the NFC West to clinch a playoff spot, which means the Niners wouldn't be in. And I think that I said, and to tie it all back, I said as one of my bold predictions that I don't think they'll be back in the Super Bowl. And I think the chances of them missing the playoffs are pretty high too. But I think we're at a point now where we're like, the shock would be if they made the playoffs, not if they missed the playoffs. Right at this point right now, with how their season is playing out, it's not a playoff season. It doesn't seem like it's not a go deep and make a run. It's, they're going to be limping to the finish line, so to speak. And I think they're probably looking at an 8-9, 7-10 record, not because they're a bad team. It's just injuries. You're not going to be able to overcome all the injuries. And, I think I saw this on First Take And I think it was Shannon Sharp that said, it's always the next man up, next man up. You're running out of next man up because that next man up is getting injured or whatnot, or you can't just fill a hole on a pivotal side of the ball that you think, the next man up can get. There's a reason why you have a starting lineup. And if you don't have good quality depth, or the players just aren't going to be able to match what you can do, you're just not going to get anywhere. So I think the Niners not being a playoff team is very plausible. It's not this year. I think their Super Bowl window is probably closed. I don't know how much of this team is going to be back next year. I know when I'm saying this, it's after week 7. Week 8 hasn't even started yet. So this is all like, hyperbole and very much, overreaction kind of situation. But I mean, just looking at it, like the Niners don't look like the Niners of last year. Injuries are piling up. It doesn't seem to be stopping, and they're happening to positions of great importance. And they're injuries that are going to put them out maybe even until the start of next season. Like Brandon Ayuk having a torn ACL. We don't know if he'll be back week 1 of next year. Hopefully, maybe, but very much could be later in the season. And again, this whole Christian McCaffrey thing, if he doesn't play for this season, when will he be ready next season? And that's not to, like, what happens if Trent Williams gets injured? What happens if George Kittle, who has a foot injury, is on there? Deebo Samuel, who missed some time because of, I think it was a hamstring or another injury nonetheless. What happens if he gets injured? So it's now turning into this thing of like, are the Niners just going to have another injured player, and can they bounce back from it? And I just think it's too far gone for that. So. And then another thing that I'll bring up real quick before I get into contenders and pretenders, which we're going to talk about in the show now, is I saw the video in the press conference of Tua basically having his first player press conference since his concussion back in week 2. And it's really heartbreaking to me to see that. I see a guy who is getting asked about his health, what he'll do in a preventative manner to ensure that maybe he doesn't get injured again, or this, that, and the other. And what is heartbreaking to see is I see a guy fighting for his identity. Clearly, football is what he knows, and that's great. It's obviously what he grew up playing. He loves the game. Nothing wrong with that. And then to see him being so defensive about wanting to play the game he loves, which he has every right to do. And no one's arguing that he doesn't have the right to play football. What I think people are asking is it worth playing football with the amount of head injuries he has had, and with the information we know about what his health may potentially be like when it's all said and done? He was asked about if he talked to his wife, and he was, I don't want to say dismissive in the sense of like, he disrespected his wife and he, doesn't care about her opinion. He just kind of brushed it off. And as someone that's married, Drew and I are both married. We've both been with our partners for quite a bit of time. I know that if there was a tough decision that I had to make and I had to talk to my wife about it, I know that my wife is super supportive, but I also know that it would be a hard conversation to have with the partner who knows you the best. For Tua, his spouse or his partner would know him better than anyone, just because, they would have seen him at his most vulnerable, and they are on a different level of a connection than friends and family would realize, because that's what your spouse is. Your spouse is somebody that you are your most vulnerable and your truest self to, if you have a relationship that allows you to do so. And to see when that question came up about what his wife had said and how quickly he just kind of answered and wanted to move on from it, tells me that the conversation that he might have had with his wife probably was a rough one to have, where his wife is supportive but doesn't agree with the choice that he made. And again, a lot of this is like not taking away Tua's choice to play football if he wants to continue to play football. And just by reading the body language and some of the responses regarding like when he was questioned about this, that, and again, going back to like when they were asked, when he was asked about what him and his wife talked about. And I get it, like keeping that private, but I'm sure she's supportive and she'll love him no matter what. But I bet she does not love the choice that he made to continue to play football. And I'm sure the reason why is because they have, if I'm not mistaken, Tua has young kids, and it's the quality of life after playing that she's thinking about. It's one thing to be into football right now. I get it. It's your job. It's what supports us. It's the career that you chose. Yes. However, when football is all said and done, what's life looking like? Because if Tua ends up in a wheelchair, let's say, because of a head injury or he's paralyzed, God forbid, his partner will be taking care of him for sure. I mean, that's ultimately what's going to happen. And I think the scary part is that is a possibility that could happen just because that's a choice that he made. And I don't necessarily think that that's something that she was happy to know that that was what was going to be the decision, but supportive, I can imagine. And then two, like Tua really kind of throwing out these really extreme examples of like, when he was asked about the risk of getting another concussion and the risk of playing, and then he throws out kind of not weird. I mean, I get why he did it. It's very like extreme examples of like, well, there's a risk getting out of bed. There's a risk driving. Yes, 100% true that there are inherent risks to certain things that you do. But in football, the risk is exponentially higher because you're putting on pads and a helmet and you are willingly throwing your body in harm's way and signing up to be hit by men that are 2 times, 3 times your size. And again, it's not that we don't believe that he can play. It's the dangers of if he gets another head injury, which is the whole point of this, is the repeated head injuries and what we understand now about CTE and the importance of that. And don't get me wrong, like the NFL is really bad about, about covering it up and trying to act like they're caping for players when there have been several examples when a player probably had a concussion. And again, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I believe Josh Allen did sustain a concussion and supposedly he cleared all protocols and got out there and was fine. And maybe, but it doesn't look great. And knowing the history of the NFL, like they're all about the bottom line. They're all about the TV. They're all about this and that. So they are willing to sacrifice a player's health on the altar of the dollar. Let's not get it twisted. And again, going back to like the whole Tua thing, it's like the quality of life that you'll have after another head injury or another head injury. Because I would bet if he played, let's say, another 3 years on the high side, if everything goes great, you think he gets 1 or 2 more concussions, how many more years are we playing here? And I get it, like for the Dolphins side of it, to not again wanting to take away whatever his choice might be and whatever the case is. I do think some teams or like the Dolphins should do at least a little bit of something to protect Tua, whether that's requiring him to wear the guardian cap, or at least do this or do that. And I get like not forcing his hand in like, hey, you need to retire because we said so and XYZ. I get it. Like, I can understand, like, you got to give him his choice. That's the ultimate right thing to do. But, to kind of hear him be so defensive. And again, I see a man struggling to not let go of his football identity because that's what he knows and that's what he loves to do, which is great. I get it. Like, that's okay to have. But I think the concern that some people have for Tua is not the ability to play football. It's his life after football and what that looks like. There's so many layers to this and it can get very minuscule, and I don't want to put on a therapist hat and assess this or assess that because I'm not qualified to do so. But on a human level, just watching Tua and hearing his responses and seeing these odd examples and just trying to, save face and I'm sure he is hearing it from everyone that he's making the wrong decision. And, he's going to go out there. He's going to play football. He's going to have the support of his teammates. Great. As a human, to see another human who his job is to perform at a high level in front of an audience and national TV watches that, I hope that he is okay for the remainder of his career. I hope that he does not turn into a player that has, a degenerate health or any sort of head trauma, that it just gets worse as time goes on. Because again, like as he gets older and as his body breaks down because of the hits and the concussions and stuff, it's the loved ones around him that are going to be paying for it. And, Tua is making his choice. That's fine. It just sucks. As humans, man, we're complicated creatures. So not to get too much on a heavy topic, but I just can't help but look at the optics of that, have feelings about it, and I'm not even scratching the surface on a majority of it. I think what's heartbreaking is there's so much to it. We get it on a human level, also trying to look, man, it's probably not the thing, and then still seeing and empathizing with someone that won't let go of that part of their life, because that's what they're attached to, that's what their identity is. And just the fear and the concern of that person's health and well-being afterwards. So I'm going to do a quick break for our partners. So stay tuned. I'm going to come back with contenders and pretenders. I'm going to give a list of about 13 teams, and I'm going to tell you if I think they're pretenders or contenders. And then I'm going to give you guys my top 3 MVP candidates as of right now. So stay tuned. Don't turn that dial like they used to say back in the day. I will be right back. So hang tight. Drew Code Sports Talk is supported by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your go-to app for tickets, making it super easy to find the best deals. They even rate each ticket deal on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting your money's worth. And as a special thank you to our listeners, we've got a promo code just for you. Use Drew Code at checkout to get $20 off your first order. That's $20 off your first purchase, whether it's for the game that you've been dying to see or that concert that everybody is talking about. Head over to SeatGeek now, find your perfect seat, and use Drew Code for $20 off your first order. SeatGeek, get your tickets to the action today. Drew Code Sports Talk is powered by StreamYard. Want to take your podcast to the next level? Use StreamYard. It's the easiest way to record, stream, or produce high-quality episodes, whether you're solo or with guests. Plus, when you sign up today, you'll get a $10 credit to get started. Use the link in our bio. Don't miss out. StreamYard is your key to seamless podcasting. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Again, if you guys are looking to get tickets to any sort of concert, game, anything of that nature, go visit SeatGeek and use Drew Code to get $20 off your first order. And also, this podcast is powered by StreamYard. So if you guys are looking to get started, there's a link in the description to click on. You guys will get a credit to start an account today and begin your podcasting journey. So jump on that, you guys. It's really useful. I've been using StreamYard, or Drew and I have, for I think 2 years now. And thankfully with a lot of good upgrades, it's even better than it was before. And it was good then. And I'm telling you, as someone that we used to do Zoom, we've done Riverside, I think was the other one. And StreamYard is hands down for us the best. So I highly recommend them if you guys are looking to sign up and get started. Super easy to use and a ton of features. So jump on that, guys. For real. Don't miss out on it. So, okay. Let's get back into it. So we're going to do pretenders and contenders. I'm going to give a team. I'm going to give the record. I'm going to tell you whether or not I think that they are a contender or a pretender. Leading off, the Buffalo Bills at 5-2. They are 2-0 in their division. I did make a note of that here. I'm going to say they're contenders. Now with acquiring Amari Cooper, their defense has been good majority of the season. Their offense now with Amari Cooper is only going to get better. He caught a touchdown pass in his first game, and there's a clip where he didn't know a route to run. Coleman basically gave him a signal to just go, and he did. Josh Allen delivered him the ball. So I think Amari Cooper having, again, a talented quarterback like Josh Allen, the most talented quarterback he has probably ever played with in his career, this team is super scary, and their offense is going to look a lot better. Coleman and Shakur were doing pretty well. You still have Dalton Kincaid, who is just a really good tight end in today's game, who's got a rapport with Josh Allen. Now you add in Amari Cooper and that defense. Bills for sure contenders. Steelers 5-2 as well. They don't have any divisional games quite yet, so they're at a 0-0 divisional record. I think that they are contenders. Even with, in my opinion, I think that they don't have the strongest of receiver cores. I mean, you got George Pickens, who will disappear or then shows up for big games. He showed up for the Jets game, so he looked really good with Russell Wilson. I do think it makes the Steelers an interesting team because now that they are more willing to air out the ball with Wilson, it does open up the run game, which they were a very good running team to begin with. Now, an argument could be made they're now a better run team because you have the passing game that's working, that activates the play action, and that play action, you get that defense that bites, take it over the top, or just continue to run the ball because your offensive line is a really good line unit. And then you have, Najee Harris, who has done a very good job this season at being a productive running back, and then having Jaylen Warren, who's a change of speed kind of back. I think the Steelers are contenders, and that defense is very, very good. I don't know if the measuring stick to say the Jets, how they had Aaron Rodgers kind of, all sorts of confused and how they rattled the Jets offense a little bit. I don't know if that's a great measuring stick, but the Steelers are a very good team, well coached. You know that with Mike Tomlin, he's going to have those guys playing for either a wild card spot or a playoff spot towards the end of the season. Never's had a losing season in his career with the Steelers, which is great. Some may argue, well, he's only been in the Super Bowl one time and he hasn't repeated. It's very hard to win in this league. And the fact that his team is always having a winning record, and this team has gone through several different identities, and they're still like a really good team. Credit to Mike Tomlin and this Steelers team. I think they're contenders, though. They look very, very good, and I'm curious to see further matchups and how this defense responds. Next team is the LA Chargers at 3-3. They got a 2-1 divisional record. I think they're pretenders. And not to throw shade at the Chargers. I'm not trying to bash on the Chargers. I submit to the fact that the Chargers are a better team today, and I would even say this season. They have the better head coach. They have the better offensive line. They have the better defense. Check all those boxes. And when we played them on week 1, they took care of business on us, as they should. And they're a very good team. And they've played some good football recently. However, they drop a game against the Cardinals. They had a good win against the divisional opponents in the Broncos. But, one of the things that I even mentioned that I don't see with the Chargers, that I don't see like a number one receiver that, they used to have with like Keenan Allen. And even though that they had Keenan Allen paired with Mike Williams, you just knew who the number one guy was. And so you knew when Keenan Allen was on the field, more than likely he's probably going to get the ball, and Justin Herbert would find him. And, when you have players like Will Dissly catching the ball and getting 11 targets with the Chargers against the Cardinals, who don't have a great defense to begin with, that's a little tough. And you can just see, like, without that offensive weapon that defenses are going to specifically game plan around to kind of then like, okay, let's open up this playbook a little bit to some other weapons. Until they have that right now, the Chargers, in my opinion, are pretenders. On the come up, though, I will say that, but not quite there. And then I've got the Broncos at 4-3. They're 1-1 in the division. I think they're pretenders. I think their defense is winning them really good games. Offense is still not quite there yet, in my opinion. Their run game is developing a little bit better. That defense is top notch. I mean, they're going to be able to win a bunch of games just on defense, and Bo Nix isn't going to have to be this all world quarterback quite yet. I think he's still a season away from doing that. But the Broncos, I don't think they're quite there yet. I think they're pretenders. I think against comparable teams, they might edge it out just because of the defensive factor. But in terms of going up against like an actual like AFC threat, I don't think they're quite there yet. Could they sneak a wild card? Maybe, but I think the chances of that are pretty slim. Even though that they have a 4-3 record, I think it's a little bit more deceiving to see that, just because I don't trust this team for the length of the season, and I think a lot of it is just inexperience. So just to be honest on that part of it. So Bengals at 3-4, they have won their last 2 games, and they're now a game below 500. Again, they came into this season as a top AFC team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They lost Joe Mixon, but they did have a decent run game. They're not it this year. They're pretenders, in my opinion. They're playing in a tougher. Their division is a lot tougher. They're third place right now. Clearly, they have a sizable lead above the Browns. I don't think they're better than the Steelers. They lost to the Ravens because of coaching, which is tough because, Zach Taylor has done a good job at, bringing this team along. But Joe Burrow, who threw for over 500 yards, and they still lost the game because they ran the ball 3 times in overtime, missed the field goal rather than being aggressive, which is what they were doing all year. They're not there yet. This is not the team that's going to get over the hump. I mean, they may get on a slight run, but I think that they're going to come across teams that the Bengals defense is not going to be able to stop. And I think there's going to be a head coaching change come next season. Jamar Chase, we got to see if he even gets extended or franchise tagged. T. Higgins, is he going to be on the team after November? I think there's a lot of question marks. And I think if the Bengals lose a couple more games coming up, or fall further below 500, or are like competitive, but they're losing games, I think we can see a fire sale on this team really, really quickly. And that could just be it. They could just now be going for the best first round pick that they can get. So I have the Bengals as pretenders. Seahawks, I think, are pretenders. Yes, they're 4-3. They're leading the division. They probably will win the NFC West, but that doesn't mean that I think that they are going to go far in the NFC West. Geno Smith has played pretty well. He leads the NFL right now in yards. I'm concerned with that offensive line. Their run game is okay. Like, don't get me wrong, Kenneth Walker III is good. Charbonnet is a good comparable back, but sometimes their play calling is questionable. I don't see DK Metcalf used a ton. I mean, he has big chunk plays, but I just don't see the type of scheming that I thought of last season when it came to their offense. And, the 49ers made them look pretty one-dimensional until it was garbage time. Then the Seahawks started moving the ball a little bit more. And, the Seahawks have had some good games, and they've had some odd losses, in my opinion. So I just don't trust the Seahawks to be a threat in the NFC. I think by default, they're going to get the division. Maybe they'll be in the running for it, but I don't see the Seahawks as a true threat. So I'm going to say they're pretenders. The Philadelphia Eagles at 4-2. They just came off of a huge win against a divisional opponent in the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley almost had a career high in rush yards on them. And just to let the Giants know what they missed out on and how they messed up by letting him walk out those doors and go to a divisional opponent, their arch rival division. Crazy. I have them as pretenders. I think they have a very talented roster. I don't think that they're going to win their division. I think the Commanders are the more solid team, and I'll talk about them towards the end of the list. But the Philadelphia Eagles, in my opinion, this is their season where they are going to be going back and forth between wins and losses, turnovers, and poor play and all this stuff. And I think a lot of it is because their head coach. I know that Nick Sirianni, in my opinion, had a very immature video about him arguing back with his own fans about their frustration with how the team has been ran. And again, Nick Sirianni, the head coach, was receiving that heat, which he rightfully gets because you are the head coach. I thought that was an immature look. This football team does not still want to take care of the football, which is concerning to me. In my opinion, with how talented this roster is, they should be beating opponents by large margins. And don't get me wrong, the Giants, they did beat them pretty handily. Argument could be made, though, that Danny Dimes helped that out, and the fact that Saquon Barkley had like an all-time rush game. But I don't look at the Philadelphia Eagles from back in like 2022 and fear them like this season, to me, the Philadelphia Eagles have a talented roster, but they don't know what to do with all this talent. They got no discipline. I don't know if there's no accountability. And I think, unfortunately, that's because of Nick Sirianni. So I don't see him lasting after this season. I think he's gone, especially if the Eagles miss the playoffs. I think if the Eagles are formally eliminated from the playoffs, which I do think may happen, Sirianni will probably be gone before the end of the season. So this 4-2 record is a little misleading because I think that they are a team that could slowly start, like, they're ultra talented, but I think they're going to come across more disciplined teams. And I think because of how dysfunctional and how this team operates this season, I don't think that they are a team to be worried about. I don't see them as contenders this season. So the Eagles, in my opinion, are pretenders. They are not contenders. The Cowboys, pretenders. They have a really bad offensive line, poor defense. If I was them, I would look at trading away. If I were them, I'd look at trading away Micah Parsons because you've paid CeeDee Lamb, you paid Dak Prescott. You're not willing to pay Derrick Henry for his services, and apparently your offense isn't good enough for Derrick Henry, according to Jerry Jones. Crazy thought there. But, I mean, you're not going to be able to afford Micah Parsons, so you might as well just trade him. If you want to trade him to the Lions, maybe a good option. They'll probably pay a lot for him because they are in need of a pass rusher since losing Aiden Hutchinson. And when Aiden Hutchinson comes back and is paired with Micah Parsons, that's probably going to be a dangerous duo. Another team, though, that might be someone that might be in the market, maybe the Ravens. Patriots might be someone that pulls the trigger on getting Micah Parsons and paying a lot for him because, Jared Mayo, he's a defensive guy, so he's going to want to have a defensive pillar on the Patriots. So that might be a logical sense. But if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, one, you're pretenders, and two, you should probably trade Micah Parsons because I don't know if you're going to be able to keep him unless you offload a ton of other talent just to keep him. Then you're overpaid in quarterback, you're overpaid in receiver, and you're overpaid on your defensive end. And you really have no other money, it sounds like, according to Jerry Jones, to spread across anywhere else. So you might as well rebuild and get younger. And the way you do that is you trade your best asset for as many additional picks back as possible. Rebuild it that way. Probably the best thing Jerry Jones could do. Will he do it? Probably not. That's okay. The Bears, 4-2. Pretenders or contenders? I'm going to say that they are contenders. I think their defense doesn't get as much credit about how tough they are and how much that they really disrupt offensive rhythms. Caleb Williams is getting a lot more comfortable now in this offense, in this league. Game is still pretty fast, but he's able to make quicker decisions. The fact that Keenan Allen is on the field and it's kind of a security blanket really helps. He hasn't really clicked yet with Adunze quite yet, but I mean, again, they're both rookies, so look to see that connection tighten up a little bit. Still have DJ Moore, who, in my opinion, with how productive he is, probably like a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL and maybe on the inside of 15. And they have DeAndre Swift, who is now starting to come into his own with that offense, with being a great runner and a really good pass catching running back. I think the Bears are contenders in this one. They have the record for it. They played some pretty good competition. And again, each game, Caleb Williams gets a little bit more comfortable and this offense starts getting a little bit more dangerous. So very interesting to see, but I think the Bears are contenders. Falcons, pretenders or contenders. They're a 4-3 record. They just dropped a game on Sunday. Kirk Cousins has them out here looking a lot better. I'm going to say that they are contenders. I know that's surprising to say, considering, I just bashed on the Broncos, who have a similar record. I bashed on the Cowboys, who only have a 3-3 record. But I think here, the reason why I say the Falcons is because, one, I think they're better coached. I think Raheem Morris is a better coach. Their defense is very good. I think it's underrated. It definitely makes offenses that they are going up against, it really makes them struggle and keeps the Falcons into games. Kirk Cousins has come into his own now. He's getting a lot more comfortable with this offense. Drake May is looking like that legit number one receiving option that he should have been, but didn't really hit it off well with Desmond Ridder. That was like a bust of a pick. And then you have Bijan Robinson that looks phenomenal, who is my like fantasy MVP, even though like there have been a couple games where he hasn't really had great stats. But the fact that he is utilized as much as he is and just how versatile he is, he's a guy that you want on your team if you're a fantasy team. But he looks great in this offense. Darnell Mooney, who former Bear, has looked great as a second option, and he's come alive as well. This Falcons team is pretty scary, pretty interesting, and I think they're contenders. I think their offense can compete with a lot of teams. You know, if Kirk Cousins can protect the ball a little bit, don't turn it over. But again, Kirk Cousins is going to take chances. That's what you risk. But I think that fortunately the Falcons have a defense where if Kirk Cousins takes risk, the Falcons may be able to get the ball back, maybe get a 3-and-out, or defend their side of the field, so that way they don't give up too many second chance points to other teams. And also too, I think the Falcons may be buyers come this trade deadline, where they may look to acquire players that might help deepen their defense, because they are probably going to want to make sure that they shore up that side of the ball in order to be like someone that's serious about their playoff intentions. And, you know, being a 4-3 team, being at the top of their division, I mean, they're a pretty exciting team. So I would say they're for sure contenders. Packers 5-2, absolutely contenders. They went against the my number one team in the AFC. Their defense really shut that offense down, which I was a little shocked at, but that Packers defense came to play. They really had CJ Stroud playing scared. I'm not saying that he is scared, but he just had a poor play. And credit to the Packers. Jordan Love, though, with the turnovers, we really need to work on that. But, you know, again, threw 3 touchdowns and looked really, really good. And despite the turnovers, was able to overcome that, and they were able to win. And, you know, Matt LaFleur, man, short list of coach of the years, in my opinion. I think he's on there next to Kevin O'Connell. D'Amico Ryan, is on there, and a couple of other coaches I'm forgetting right now off the top of my head. But, you know, for sure, Matt LaFleur is on that short list, man. What he's been working with and how he's been getting this team going, looking great. By the way, did you know that Matt LaFleur used to have Aaron Rodgers on the team? I don't know if anyone knows that or not. Aaron Rodgers, had Matt LaFleur, and I remember Aaron Rodgers having an issue with Matt LaFleur and his coaching or whatever. Kind of weird. Matt LaFleur, second season without, Aaron Rodgers, has his team at 5-2, and they're a legit. Oh man, that's crazy. They're a legit contenders in the NFC, and they're playing really well. In fact, like I said, Matt LaFleur looking like a coach of the year candidate. Did you know that last year, Matt LaFleur, Jordan Love, and the Packers went to the divisional playoffs in the NFC? Yeah, kind of crazy, huh? Oh, where did Aaron Rodgers? Oh, that's right. He had an injury. What's Aaron Rodgers doing? Oh yeah, he has a 2-5 record with no head coach. And his former OC at the Packers that he drug with him to the Jets, that doesn't even have play calling responsibilities anymore. And that offense looks porous at best. Anyways, that was interesting points. I just thought I'd ask if anyone knew that. It was fun facts, I thought. Niners 3-4, talked about this. Pretenders, injuries are derailing them. I don't think that they have the momentum on their side. I think there's a real possibility that the worst is still to come. It's going to get rough. Niner fans, buckle up. You guys might be looking at an average season. Welcome to the club. It's a long list, so get comfortable. And then the Commanders, contenders or pretenders. I got them as contenders. Now, look, I'm a little concerned with Jaden Daniels. He did leave the game with a rib injury. However, Marcus Mariota looked really good in relief, or a long relief, I'd say, because he basically went in there in the first quarter, played really, really well. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, is onto something here, where he has simplified NFL offenses to translate into college sense, if that makes any sense, because we saw Marcus Mariota probably play some really good football that was surprising, that we haven't seen since he was in college, which, by the way, he was a high draft pick when he came out of college. And again, Marcus Mariota having Cliff Kingsbury kind of simplify it to the point to where, it's going to be productive and it gets the best out of Marcus Mariota. I'm not saying that Cliff Kingsbury is this great coach. Let's not get that twisted. But the fact that Kingsbury with Daniels and with Mariota has been able to get some pretty good production out of him. Now, we can also say that Mariota had a good game because their opponents maybe didn't have a scouting report on Mariota. It's very likely, but I think the fact that the Commanders have a defense that is able to cause a little disruption, but they have weapons. They have a run game. They have an offensive line that's pretty good. They have a offensive-minded play-calling head coach, Dan Quinn, again, former defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, also former head coach with the Atlanta Falcons, who led them to the Super Bowl. Again, they did blow a 25-3 lead, I think, was the score to the Patriots. But forget about that history lesson. But the Commanders, in my opinion, I think they are contenders. They've gone up against really healthy competition. They had a very good game against the Ravens. Ravens did take care of business, but if ever there was some confidence to give out on that team, is just how competitive and how advanced this Commanders team looks with Dan Quinn's first year with the team, Jaden Daniels as a rookie, and all the other pieces that they have in place. I think the Commanders are contenders, and I think that they're going to win their division. Cowboys ain't going to get there. We know the Giants ain't going to get there. I don't believe in the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe in the Commanders far more than the Eagles. And an argument could be made that the Eagles have the better roster. But again, I think this goes with coaching. It goes with discipline. It goes with just all the other nuanced stuff that beyond talent, it's all the stuff that matters. And I think that's what the Commanders have over the Eagles, which is why I think the Commanders are legit. They're going to win their division. And I think that they are a legit team coming out of the NFC. I think they are for sure contenders. So that's my contenders or pretenders, you guys. Let me know down below if you agree with the pretenders or contenders. Let me know down below who you would trade out, or if you agree with it. Let me know all that. Love to hear it. This is my top 3 NFL MVP candidates as of right now after week 7. Number 1, I've got Jared Goff. Team is at a 6-1 record. Jared Goff has a career high in completion percentage right now at 73.6%. And he's thrown the ball for over 1,600 yards at this point, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, career high in passer rating with an 11.5 passer rating. Outrageous. The last few games, he has had far more touchdown completions than incompletions. I think two weeks ago, he went 18 for 18 with some ridiculous stat, which we hardly ever see. To be that efficient in the NFL against professionals, against defenses in the NFL, is absolutely crazy. So he is one of my NFL MVP candidates. I have him number 1, not to say I think he's leading the clubhouse, so to speak, but he's on the list. He's one of the 3, okay? So let's not get bogged down in the ranking of it, okay? Number 2, no surprise, should be on everyone's list, Lamar Jackson, 68.2 completion percentage, which is his career high. Also has 17 total touchdowns, 15 through the air, 2 on the ground. Only has 2 interceptions, and he's also has a career high in passer rating at 118. Phenomenal. He has 1,800 throwing yards right now, 450 rushing yards. So he's at about 2,260 total all-purpose yards, essentially. Having a phenomenal season. Argument could be made that he's having a better season this year than he did in his MVP season last year, and real possibility that he goes back-to-back. I almost wanted to say Derrick Henry was the MVP until Monday Night Football when Lamar Jackson beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that was a great showing from Lamar Jackson to just say, don't get me wrong, Derrick Henry is important to the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, though, is the most valuable player for the Ravens, though. He is everything to them. And the reason why Derrick Henry is successful is because of Lamar Jackson, which is great. And before I continue with number 3, looks like the Lakers have won the opening game with against the Minnesota Timberwolves as I'm watching this right now. I don't know what Bronny's stats are. I'll probably have to look those up a little bit later, but it looks like they're both going to have a post-game interview with the sideline reporter of TNT. But ultimately, the Lakers win their home opener against the Minnesota Timberwolves, so that's pretty cool. Anyways, okay, back to number 3 on my top 3 MVP candidates after week 7. Number 3, Josh Allen. 63% completion percentage, 1,400 passing yards. That number is probably going to go up exponentially now that he has a number 1 weapon. He's only rushed for about 179 yards, but he has 15 total touchdowns, 12 passing, 3 rushing, no interceptions. He has 1 fumble, no losses, no fumble losses. So in other words, he has no turnovers through 7 weeks of the NFL season, and he has a passer rating of 108.4, and he has his team leading his division at a 5-2 record that was without a number 1 weapon. So the fact that Josh Allen has done what he has with as little as he has this late in the season, and he has got now his number 1 weapon with Amari Cooper, absolute game changer. No doubt that Josh Allen is at the top of this list right now in my top 3 for NFL MVPs. Now, I will give a couple of honorable mentions because I think it is important to at least acknowledge these players, because if I do this list in a couple of weeks and these players eclipse one of these top 3, don't be shocked, because these are other players that I could have very easily changed out Josh Allen for or Jared Goff for, just because these players are also doing really, really well this season, and an argument could be made that MVP. No, Patrick Mahomes isn't on this honorable mention. First honorable mention will be Jaden Daniels, rookie, doing what he's doing, making his team as good as they are. Definitely think that he needs to be mentioned at least in the thought of potentially being an MVP candidate. Don't know if he'll win it, but a candidate nonetheless, just because of how well he's done. And he himself, Jaden Daniels, has also won games for his team with his legs and with his arm. Very similar to Lamar Jackson, but the fact that he's doing it as a rookie and his team is also kind of dangerous. So I will, that needs to be mentioned with Jaden Daniels. Jordan Love. If the turnover number wasn't so high, Jordan Love would probably be number 3 on this list. And I'm not going to have the 2 games that he was gone against him. You can't always predict when you're going to have an injury. It's not his fault. But since he's been back, of course, he has won his last 2 games. And he has looked really good, thrown the ball really, really well. The turnovers are what bother me. High turnover, high interception numbers. Need to have that cut down. I know he's a gunslinger. He's got to take chances. That's great. But what I think Matt LaFleur is going to continue to instill in Jordan Love, which is why, again, Jordan Love is just on the honorable mention list, is we've got to be smart with the football. We can't always give the opposing team extra opportunities to defeat us. We have to take care of the ball. If it's not there, throw it away. You don't need to be superhero or Superman on every single play. We just need to make smart decisions with the football and trust our defense, which the Packers have a really good defense. When Jordan Love can start doing that, probably could see him escape or a little creep into the top 3 in my MVP. And then ultimately, number 3, and this isn't because of the record that his team has. This is strictly because of the player. Joe Burrow, honorable mention for MVP. If ever there was a truer sense of the most valuable player for your team, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Justin Herbert, it's Joe Burrow. And the reason why is because Joe Burrow has only 2 interceptions on the season. He's in the top 5 in passing yards and passing touchdowns right now in the NFL, and has a staggering, I think it's like 109 QB passer rating. So he's in the top 5 in yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and also in QB passing rating. If it wasn't for his team being only 3 and 4, Joe Burrow would be number 3. I would have him above Josh Allen because I think that Joe Burrow means more to the Bengals with where they are than Josh Allen. And I think that he should be considered as a candidate for the MVP. It doesn't help that his team is at a 3 and 4 record and they're kind of trending. They're kind of trending in a positive direction, but their defense is going to lose them a lot of games. Is Joe Burrow going to do enough to overcome all that? I don't know, but Joe Burrow should at least get a little bit of an honorable mention just because of what he's had to deal with. and the turmoil, the slow start, and again, coming back from an injury on his throwing hand, to see him throw the ball as well as he is and look as comfortable as he is, and his connection with Jamar Chase, his connection with T. Higgins since T. Higgins has been back, has looked really, really good, and it can't go unnoticed. I think Joe Burrow, honorable mention for MVP. So that's that, you guys. That's my it's my top 3 with my honorable mention for NFL MVP. Let me know down below who your top 3 NFL MVP candidates are. I'd love to know. I love to see how wild this list is. If it's all quarterbacks like mine is, if there's other players that you guys are considering, please let me know who your guys' top 3 NFL MVP candidates are. I'd love to hear it. So I appreciate you guys so much for listening. I'm going to be signing off now. Thank you very much for tuning in to Drew Code Sports Talk. Please do me a favor. Go to our social medias, our Instagram, our Twitter, Facebook, Threads, X. Follow us on there. We've got some exciting announcements coming and a couple of collabs that we're ironing out. One's kind of already lined up that we'll be talking about probably within the next day or so. So that's super exciting. So stay tuned for that. And check us out on all the social media platforms like I had mentioned. Follow us on YouTube. If you're watching now on YouTube, please do me a favor. Go hit subscribe right now so that way you guys are notified when a video comes out or when we're live or whatnot. You can also watch all of our past episodes. We've got a whole archive on there of all of our stuff. Please go and check it all out. I'd really appreciate it. Drew would really appreciate it. And also, too, follow us on all the podcast platforms wherever you listen to. If you love to listen on Spotify, follow us on there. If you want to listen to us on Apple, subscribe on there and get notified as soon as a podcast goes live. I try to do one every week, and sometimes we have special edition episodes and stingers up, so stay tuned for that. And it's just got to get that much more exciting as the year goes on and as seasons go on. So I'd really appreciate you guys for doing all that and subscribing, following, and being a part of the Drew Code family. Really love it. So like I said, Drew sends his love, sends his best. As soon as a Stingers Up episode is live, you guys will be the first ones to know about it. And there's all sorts of exciting stuff happening in Sanger West that you guys are going to want to stay tuned for. So that's it for me, guys. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Be kind to one another, and I will see you guys next time. So take care.